David, thank you so much for joining us. You've got some exciting stories, obviously.
But being hardwired as we're walking up here, being one of them.
Yeah,
right? That's awesome.
That was
I love
exciting.
that. Yeah, very rock and roll.
So, tell us how Megadeth got started. Take us back in time and how the band came to be.
So I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, got into playing rock and roll, picked up the bass guitar at age 11, put bands together by age 12, was playing semi-professionally, meaning someone paid us at least $50 to go play by about the time I was 13. And I was always the guy that was kind of the business guy, calling the agents, calling club owners and people just anywhere we could go play. And as underage kids, we at least had to have a sound man 19 years of age who could get us in the bar, you know. But I moved to Hollywood right after I graduated high school in 1983. I moved into an apartment underneath a young budding rock star named Dave Mustaine, who was in this band I hadn't heard of yet called Metallica. And he had done a couple years with them and had just parted ways and was ready to start his next venture. And he and I met, and we launched Megadeth in June of 1983. In fact, we're just now doing our 35 years of Megadeth campaign.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Megadeth was essentially the first band to have a website on the internet.
Yes.
How did that come to be?
So our first record was an independent on an independent label called Combat Records, which ironically I just got the trademark, and we just relaunched that, Combat Records. So I got to relaunch my home, my alma mater where I started. The goal in those days is you start on an independent label and then you move up to a major. And Capitol Records picked up Megadeth in 1986, and that continued a 7-album, almost 20-year career where we had, huge multi-platinum success, and Grammy nominations, and all the great stuff you'd hope for. And in 1994, we had relocated over to Scottsdale, Arizona, where I still live, just one desert away over here. And we set out we built a studio, we recorded an album called Euthanasia. And Capitol Records they flew over to us with a team of people. Robin Bechtel in particular was the woman in charge of this initiative. And they said, we want to build what's called a website. And we're like, well, what is a website? Well, it's on the World Wide Web. What's the World Wide Web? Well, we don't really know yet, but we think it's going to be big. And that started the conversation, and to launch the Euthanasia album and campaign later that year in October 1994, as the album came out, we had on the web the very first musical artist website called Megadeth Arizona, and it was hosted at, I believe, hollywoodandvine.net, which is essentially the address that Capitol Records uses, where the big tall tower is. So that was how the whole thing started. It was a very large, very cumbersome, if in doubt, throw it in kind of mindset. I mean, this thing was pages deep, and long before we realized that having a landing page and the more mouse clicks you have to make someone have, the less chance you have of them actually getting to what you want them to see. In those days, it was the opposite. Like, we don't know what of this is going to work, so let's just throw it all in. And that was the very first website.
And so at the time, Megadeth.com was available for registration, but you guys didn't register it. So who got that, and how did you end up transitioning to Megadeth.com?
As we found out, so a fan had Megadeth.net, I believe it was, and now I think this is when you could buy it, via email for like $100 for 2 years, and he had it, and then it expired. So fast forward to the next record that we did, Cryptic Writings, which launched in 1997. That was the campaign where fans of ours, actually I should say, up in San Jose area, Silicon Valley, where now all of a sudden the web had started to explode, and it was something that everybody was getting, a part of, especially in music. Long before social media, but still the domain name was the hot news, And so that one, Megadeth.net, I believe it was, had expired. And somebody else bought it with the intention of and I think we might even have a screen maybe of the actual original. It's sitting in an archive, actually, that you can go see. And there's an archive of it that shows, there's the original one, and I think maybe it's the one right after that. And it was the original, it was his intent to build out, there it is, yeah. And it's funny because I think down on the bottom there's a clicker count of,
A web counter.
you are Megadeth fan number, is it a
119.
yeah, exactly. And then I think there's another slide now that shows, now that was I think a .net, right? So then after that, of course, now today, this is our Megadeth Facebook page, so moving into social media, and I think if you scroll down, what is our, I think we're at 8 million, so
a few more.
We've moved along, yeah, we've done pretty well since the 20 years since that one was pushed out, so.
And what did you do, so now you have a more advanced website. What sorts of things did you do on there? Did you interact with fans?
Yes, this was back in the day when record companies had money because they sold records long before the internet, ironically, and they hadn't quite figured out internet strategies yet. But so they would spend lavish money on these big parties, and we did a launch party in London. We did a launch party up at a big mansion in the Hollywood Hills, and I remember there was a room as we walked in. They said, "Hey, David, can you come back to this room? We have these computers set up." And kind of like here, there's like tech people and everybody, like a team of people around a couple of Macintosh computers. And they said, "If you can get on here and into this chat room and chat." And we all had our own email addresses. Okay. And fans were encouraged to stop in at this launch party on this particular day in October 1994. And I remember chatting with a fan in Sweden, and they were like typing back, and I was typing to them. And it all seemed very archaic, and was like, is this really going to take off? Yeah, this chatting thing, But it was cool that we could be very interactive with the fans in that moment. And fans loved that they could speak personally to us, and they knew it was us typing on the other line. And this was long before video cameras and things like that.
Right, and this is what, late 90s, mid to late 90s?
This was 1994, so.
This was originally
October 94, so, yeah, exactly.
And so, I remember in the mid-90s to late 90s going to college, it was hard enough for me to get on the internet in my dorm room. How did you guys, touring and such, how did you get on the internet?
Well, and speaking to that, some of us here probably remember, I remember at my grade school growing up in Jackson, Minnesota, they had a Macintosh computer that cost probably, Apple, it cost $10,000. And remember, it had the cradle for the phone, right? And it would take like 10 minutes to dial up. I said, whatever you do, don't touch the computer without signing in, it was this sacred beast in the room. And, but that year actually, in 94, we kicked the tour off down in South America, and which has become and still is to this day really the holy grail for Megadeth's popularity down there. And Dave Mustaine and I in particular, I remember we had our Apple computers. Apple's kind of been the go-to in the creative arts community in Hollywood and that. And we had called a janitor up at the Sheraton Hotel in Buenos Aires, called a janitor up to rip the phone lines apart in the wall so we could somehow hardwire to get a 56K modem jack plugged into the wall so we could chat with fans, because it was important to us. And I think this is one of the things with Megadeth. At one point, a manager called us the state-of-the-art speed metal band. But I think that thinking is always carried through in everything that we do to try to be first to market and to be on the front edge of all this stuff. And fan interaction is hugely important. In fact, even today, as I was putting up the NamesCon photo, it's so important, what we write, how we tag it, that it's in a language they understand, sort of end user, just kind of thinking through that whole thing. And
so give me an example. When you did this today, how did you think through that, and how did you?
Well, just yesterday I was at a music trade show called the NAMM show in Anaheim. I was there for the last several days. That's something very common in our industry. People like Fender, Gibson, musical instrument manufacturers exhibit there. Supposedly it's closed to the public, but it seems like everybody knows someone in a music store, so they can get a badge to come in. So rock stars are there. It's kind of the norm to be there. Coming to Vegas and being in a sort of tech convention, if you will, is a little bit out of school for a heavy metal fan, a headbanger that would listen to Megadeth. So just writing, invited to do the keynote today. And, I thought I should what's the relevance? Well, speaking about the origins of Megadeth Arizona, and especially in hashtagging 35 years of Megadeth, which is a hashtag we're now using on all of our social media posts throughout this year as every month we're celebrating We have 15 studio albums over the 12 months. We're celebrating an album per month. We had to double up a couple of months. In fact, January, our most recent album, Dystopia, and a record back in 1988 had both launched in January. So that's part of the celebration. So strategically, from management to the band, as we go through everything we post, you know, hashtagging things, which of course work on Instagram. And I like to post a lot from Instagram because I think people like to see photos of us, the band members. It's one thing to say, here I am at Starbucks. It's another to say, hey, here I am at Starbucks, you know, and you know, in its simplest form. So I think more than anything in our world, they like to see us being engaged because, you know, we come from a very kind of, our interaction with the fans has always been, you know, very kind of ordinary, you know, every man is kind of heavy metal. And so I think it's important that we always maintain that image with our fans.
So originally you were interacting with them on your website, and then obviously social media, these platforms created. What was the first platform that you would say you guys got involved in?
MySpace.
MySpace,
right?
Yes.
I had a girl actually out of Toronto. She was a fan, and she was, you know, pretty savvy with this. And one day I forgot even how she got a hold of me. But I have a davidellison.com website that had a mail program attached to it, and I would go in and, you know, try to just. It kind of became in some ways sort of a junk mail. I have an old AOL account that is the same thing, for those who remember. I just keep AOL just because I'd love to just make my friends cringe and they go, you've got mail. Which funny thing is remember they used to have the CDs that would come in the mail, like, you know, and you put those in. Touring in the late 90s, you'd go to Japan. Probably even a floppy disk back then, and you know, when you'd be in Roppongi, Tokyo, trying to get a dial-up, at least they'd give you 8 options of where to dial in, and that was kind of how we rolled around the world. But I then moved forward. I have a davidellison.com site, which I have today, and you know, that email woman, you know, contacted me and said, hey, I'd like to help facilitate and run some of your, you know, what's becoming social media. And I said, sure, go ahead. And so we worked out an arrangement for that. And first, you know, was on MySpace. And then she said, you know, you should really get this new Facebook thing. We think it's going to be big. And I'd already been down that road with Megadeth Arizona. We think it's going to be big. So the idea is like, sure, why not? You know, so secure the domain. And in fact, with Twitter, I had to use Ellison David, because there is a guy, David Ellison, and he looks like just kind of like a guy in an office with like
that doesn't have the long hair.
Yeah, and I think he's got like 4 posts, so I don't know if he really is David Ellison or if he grabbed the name. On Facebook, someone actually did have my name, and I had to go through EMI Records up to, you know, Facebook corporate and get my name back, which they're really good about doing that for celebrities and, you know, and that kind of thing, and I guess probably companies and stuff, especially if you need to have a, you know, like a professional page like I do for Facebook.com/David Ellison. And the way we have my davidellison.com site set up now is that everything I post from Facebook just automatically news feeds right through. So I don't really even have to touch it because, you know, back in the day when a .com or a .net was so important, and it still is important because it's sort of the official planting your flag, here I am as a business. More than ever now, we mostly use social media, and so to have social media automatically push through into your .com is so helpful because I seldom even go to my own website.
Let me ask you about that because, you know, at one point you guys controlled your interactions with your fans through your website. Now you're relying on these social media platforms, and Facebook just recently came out and said, hey, we're going to emphasize more of the friend-to-friend interactions than the businesses and the things you fan and that sort of thing. They're almost a gatekeeper between what you post on your Facebook page and who gets to see it. Does that concern you?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, Facebook probably more than anything allows us to be like right here in the room with you, especially with Facebook Live, which we do a lot of. And I have one both for my own feed. I also have one that I can flip open to go right to the Megadeth feed. And I try to be, you know, use good judgment that if it's a personal endeavor that I'm on, I use my own. One where I'd say on a Megadeth tour, and I want to take, pull up to a venue, get out of the tour bus, walk into the backstage, see the arena full of people, I'll go to the Megadeth one. So those things, and of course it's 100% engagement because fans can engage immediately with you. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that you want is engagement. And I even see other artists and musicians and whatnot who are trying to build up their numbers, and some of them look clearly like that's what they're trying to do. And I think the trick is to have a very organic feel with it, so that it's especially in rock and roll, as he was kind enough to mention my Ellison Coffee Company. We're a rock and roll coffee company, so I've had people come to me and say, you need to be in Safeway and you need to be here, and it's like, listen, I'm growing coffee business just like I grow rock bands. They have to be organic, believable. Your customers, your fans, they're all one. And it needs to be something that they, your name is your reputation, and is also your customer assurance that what they're getting has quality. And so it's important to build that very organically. And I think social media now more than ever is, takes a lifetime to build a name, and it takes only one or two dumb things to just destroy it.
Sure. Well, why don't we, I have plenty more I'd love to ask you, but I wanted to open it up and see if there are any questions in the audience at this point. Anyone have questions? It looks like there's one back there. Do we have someone on a mic? Eric?
Hi, thanks for being here.
Yes.
Congratulations on the Grammy last year.
Yes, thanks.
So it's about time.
Yeah.
We're a big Megadeth fan.
Took 12 times. I guess if you don't die and don't quit, you finally get one.
Exactly. So my name is Konstantin Rusas. I'm from Dot Music.
Yeah,
so I've got a question for you. It hasn't launched yet. Dot Music hasn't launched yet. So I'm sure Andrew would be interested in this question as well. If you would have to redirect a domain extension, and there was an option, one that you have, megadeth.com versus megadeth.music, which one would be your preference in 5 years' time?
So yours hasn't launched. Yeah, I think I like that because, I go and I grab domain names all the time. In fact, I'll come up with an idea. My wife was just hitting me this morning on something. Oh my gosh, can you check and see if that's available? And it turned out it was, or that it was not. Someone already had taken it. But sometimes, my motto is if you can dream it, secure it. If you have a thought or a dream on something, man, go grab it. I spend a lot of money with GoDaddy buying domain names that, I may, usually my motive is if I have a thought, I get the domain, and then I sometimes will even go to the USPTO and get a trademark on it. If it's, I've learned with trademarks that can be very contentious. But one of the things that always comes up is the .info, .biz, .org, and all those things, which are fine. But I think, it's interesting, in the music domain, to have a .music, I like it. I think it's cool.
Just to give you some background, we applied as a community top-level domain with policies that ensure that brands like Megadeth, they don't cyber squat their names. So there are policies that don't exist in .com. So we thought that would be a responsible way to launch it.
Sure, yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you for doing that, by the way. But yeah, I think, again, originally started out as a .net and went to a .com. So, those, your extension is almost a brand as well, It's like the MySpace versus Facebook thing.
Other questions? None yet? It's too early on a Monday morning.
Should have brought coffee.
Yeah. So actually,
brought your coffee.
I know. I should have brought some over. Had I known, I would have.
Gave our brand all.
Let me ask you about that though, because creating a coffee company, obviously you're leveraging your brand, your personal brand in that case. You decided. I remember we were chatting, and you were deciding, do we want to open a coffee shop and sell it there, or do we want to do this online? Walk me through kind of your decision process.
Yeah, that's right. I remember we chatted on that. Well, it's interesting because you're right. We immediately went for the fans. In fact, how the coffee thing started, a guitar player friend of mine over in Charlotte, North Carolina, he and his wife have a coffee roasting business, and I was introduced to him. I came up with the names like Roast in Peace, Kenya Thrash, Rock and Rose. These are, you know, names that I come up with. And they're synonymous. Megadeth has an album called Rust in Peace. So the Roast in Peace became kind of a play on that. Megadeth is known as a thrash metal genre band, so can you thrash? So we just, you know, do tie-ins that are witty, they're fun, and by and large, they could be a one-shot buy for as like a memorabilia piece. You know, like a lot of the wine business is big, and so is the beer business now with rock and roll bands. Sometimes it's memorabilia, sometimes people love to drink it. So we thought about all these things as we got started on it. And we initially launched online with just ellisoncoffeeco.com. We pushed that out, and what was nice about that is it's, you know, pretty much 100% profit off, you know, after our expenses, because we don't have to have a retailer, and we don't have to have any distributor costs in the middle. And you know, so after we would basically roast, bag, ship, and it would arrive to you. You open the box, and it's like coffee potpourri. You know, it's like nice and fresh. Whereas if you go to the store, the challenges of making sure that it's that same concept, but you know, making sure that it doesn't sit on the shelf for more than, say, 45 to 60 days at the most. So supply chain management becomes a bigger part of that. And also, you know, now we have to sell at a sort of wholesale cost to a store, and we're big in rock and roll record shops, music stores,
okay,
as well as the more kind of rock and roll cafes and things like that would offer a drink like ours.
Cool. Do we have a question? We have a question up front there.
If you were to assign, say, a percentage, I'm not talking dollars, but a percentage of the success of your band from start to now, and credit it to your online presence, be it your website, social media, whatever, you know, do you think your online presence has contributed 10% to your success, 50% to your success?
Well,
and sustaining it, what do you think it is that maintains?
I think sustaining it is probably more than anything, because, you know, we got in under the wire when MTV, in fact, that song that they played when we walked up, that bass line that I performed, became, MTV they said MTV News, and then they'd play that lick,
I remember that.
That became a household lick. I became very famous by just playing a bass line that one day somebody at MTV decided to use as their news item, you know. And they used that for 10 or 12 years. I mean, people come up to me all the time, oh my gosh, I remember MTV News. So, you know, just dumb luck, you know, brought forth huge success. But, you know, video and MTV, long before all the social media and the domain name, you know, business got involved in the arts and celebrity. I mean, you could still sell records. We made a lot of money back in those days doing that. But those were the building days of the brand, the building days of the band. And it's interesting because the record companies in those days, they didn't claim our name, they didn't claim our merchandising, they didn't claim any of that. They just claimed basically the master recordings, which they will own pretty much forever, as well as the artwork on the album. Well, as, for instance, our Capitol Records deal expired, we were able free to leave, and we still own Megadeth. We still own all of the imagery that goes along with that. So we were able to take that, and it was kind of an interesting little XY axis, you know, of time when, as the record business started to diminish, and largely we all remember, well, those of us who are my age, remember the Napster issue. I mean, they were the original bad boys on the internet, and our friends in Metallica chose to, you know, go up against that, and they clearly said, look, we have the money to fight this, trust us, follow us to do it. Unfortunately, the press they got on it was so negative and so horrible, because again, the way a heavy metal fan thinks is, well, you're already rich, why are you complaining that we're taking your music for free, you know? We're over that battle, and I think, you know, now people realize that they're, you know, people should be paid for what we create. However, the money we earn from Spotify and Pandora and these music streaming services are a fraction of what we used to earn from selling records. And I'll give you an example. I'm a BMI writer. BMI's job is to go out and collect from a performance on radio and TV, even concert performances, collect, you know, for the performance of those songs. I showed my daughter, because she was begging me to get a Spotify account, to to listen to Taylor Swift, I think, years ago. And I said, well, listen, Athena's her name. I said, listen, if you see my BMI on Sirius Radio, I'm a co-writer of a tune. I get about $1 a play. And that's a subscription-based service. So obviously the revenue is higher that they can pay out for artist royalties on Sirius XM. I said, here's that same song down here on Spotify. I think the song got 130,000 hits, and I got paid $1.03. So you wonder why artists complain about companies like Spotify and Pandora. And to Taylor Swift's credit, she wouldn't let them put their music on there. And so while we need we choose maybe to be in the wind of, the wind of the, wind in the sails of the Spotify's, because our music is available for people to hear. A lot of people have resisted that because essentially Spotify is making all the money. We certainly aren't as an artist, and it's our song that helped build their business. So that is where the internet has become huge for a band like Megadeth, and for us to, again, from the very beginning back in 1994, engaging with our fans, being part of this process. So to Capitol Records' credit, they were right. We don't know what this is, but we think it's going to be big. And to a large degree, Steve Jobs, I mean, he saved the music business. His even if it was just so he could sell iPods at the time. But to sort of corral it, put it all in a store that you can then take his device and get your music. I still buy everything from iTunes. I'm old school in that I pay for things because I know my buddies all have car and mortgage payments and airplane payments or whatever they're doing, But to me as an artist, I feel it's important that I support the arts and support the business that I'm in. So I'll pay the $1.29 and buy a song, But that, I think, is again the kind of that XY axis when bands were coming up, with the structure of the record industry. But then when the Napsters and those things happened and people started realizing, wow, there's other ways we're going to, really what changed in the record business was the supply chain of the internet. The internet became a new method to get music rather than going over to Tower Records and Best Buy and into those venues to purchase music. And one of the things that's kind of helped, I own a record label as well, so one of the things we see is that vinyl sales are huge right now. Even if you go into a Best Buy, there's that whole audiophile section in the back where they have, $50,000 stereos, for people that, can afford such, but also little USB turntables. So people like my daughter can have a little USB turntable and listen to this new thing called vinyl.
So it strikes me, a lot of people in this room have seen the domain business. We've had revenue streams that have gone basically to zero, like domain parking, and so people have had to figure out other ways to make money. So it sounds like vinyl, which I guess you didn't have to figure out, that just kind of happened.
Yeah, right.
But then, so your internet presence and basically leveraging your brand, right? So that has become, you guys are still touring, right?
Yes.
And so is that kind of the biggest part when it comes to your business and revenue now, or is it these other ancillary?
No, for sure. And again, we were fortunate enough to build up to have these record sales and be well known around the world and have this, when television was a very viable way of getting music into a household and getting a celebrity or a band awareness and artist awareness into a household. Those things, we were able to build our brand with that. So then as the internet came in and diminished a lot of those methods and those pipelines for us, our touring business now is largely where I guess we are now classic rock. That. But you see, Journey and Def Leppard just put out a tour, and the artists like that continually do summer touring, and there's a reason they only tour in the summer, because they can go play those outdoor amphitheaters. That's where the money is at its best, and the merchandising, and people still want to go have that live experience. In fact, there's back in the late 90s, a friend of mine from Apple Computer had hit me, and he wanted to do like a live streaming Megadeth concert, and he just said, he goes, look, I'm a huge fan, and I'm the boss, I can do whatever I want. And we talked about it, and it just never happened. And in 2001, we actually played a venue in Phoenix. It was called the Webb Theater. It's now I think a U of A college campus now. But a guy had bought that with the intention of doing live internet streaming concerts. So there were all these different ideas that people had. you know, especially in the 90s was this, you know, heading into our .com bubble, you know, that we all, you know, were aware of.
You guys even did like an online auction back then.
We did do an online auction, yeah. We had a warehouse, you know, probably double the size of this, of just old gear, you know, that we'd used over the years, old guitar cabinets and guitars and drums and things, and we were just like, look, we're paying for all the storage space. So we did an auction on Megadeth.com for our fans to buy that equipment, and had I known what some of that stuff would be worth today, I probably wouldn't have sold some of it. But it's fun because the fans now enjoy those. In fact, one fan bought the bass. I recorded that I used in the video for that walk-up song that we just had, the MTV hit. And he actually, instead of selling it, he actually placed it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame over in Cleveland. He was so mad that there was no heavy metal or Megadeth in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was just Madonna's Brazier and whatever else he had. So he said, there needs to be something Megadeth here. So it's on display. He put it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I thought was pretty cool.
Derek, we have a question behind you. Derek's working on like a deposition brief here.
Hi, thanks for being here. And I've got 3 questions. 2 of them are really short then. Did you get paid every time they played that bass line on the news on MTV?
Finally, we got paid. You know, there was this whole discrepancy of like if it's one measure, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And it would cut off right before the downbeat of the next bar. That they wouldn't have to pay, right?
Yeah, I've heard.
Why would they, right? It was Viacom. You know?
Okay, and a little more on topic. You said that you spent a lot of money with GoDaddy. What kind of domains do you collect, buy, and what do you do with them?
You know, now I think more about, especially with the coffee business, I think more about food and beverage stuff. You know, it's ironic having coffee, which I'm passionate about, because I don't always play music every day, but I definitely drink coffee every day, you know, so. And you know, now beer companies have infused our coffee into their beer to make beer stout, or coffee stout rather, and there's even a hard cider company in Scottsdale that's doing the same thing, putting our coffee inside of a hard cider. So, and you know, a biscotti and cheesecake company in California doing it. So all of a sudden my world has opened up in my thought process that, you know, coffee isn't just for breakfast anymore, you know, that it can go into all these other things. So I'm always thinking about cafe names, I'm thinking about restaurant ideas and things like that. And again, I'm quite busy touring the world in Megadeth and doing all that, but again, as you know, the things that we created so many years ago become the wind in our sails to push us forward into new ventures. So those are mostly the things that I
Business ventures.
Exactly, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned you guys were fortunate enough to be around an MTV era where you could get this play, and you know that's how your fans learned about you. But you now have young artists, right, that are on your label that you're helping.
Right.
So how do you create their social media presence or their presence? How do you get them discovered, if you will?
Well, for instance, I signed this young group out of Arizona called Dollskin. 4 young girls. I saw them actually. My son invited me to be a judge at a high school talent show, and they were the last band to play, and they were just incredible. They were just just a great musical artist. And so I took them in the studio. I put out a EP for them, which is just a shorter, like a 6-song album. And that's how my label formed, is we essentially became kind of an artist development project, kind of a production company. And for them, you know, I put some pictures out and some photos of us in the studio on my own platforms, through my Instagram and Facebook, just to get a presence. And as they then had they were, to their credit, they were very smart. They got DollskinBand.com, and that's their branding they use across all their social media, including their website. So they're very uniform and consistent with all of their domains, their domain as well as their social media. And then as we even had a woman out of New York come in and really we had her come in as a consultant to work with us on that. And usually on social media, especially with a young group, the engagement is always asking questions. You know, hey, who's coming to see us in Tampa tonight? Because it just opens up dialogue. And I myself am guilty of it sometimes too, where, you know, all of us in the music business are to some degree shameless self-promoters, you know, and we're always pushing out, hey, look at me doing this, you know, rather than engaging. being a Vikings fan, of course, last week was the big tweet, go Vikings, kind of thing. But those kind of tweets, even with sports, even over in rock and roll, when you put out something about sports, all of a sudden you're a little out of your domain, you can tag the NFL or whatever, and the Vikings, and now all of a sudden you're tethered out into another world. And so oftentimes it's about asking a question so that people will engage with you, and on Twitter is a big one. And Twitter and Instagram. So those are the things that I still do, but we advise like a young artist like that on the label to just get engagement with your fans, because then you can kind of start to see who's a lover and who may be a hater, because not everyone's going to like you.
Right.
And so you can kind of start to push the walls out a little bit of some of your lifestyle stuff as well. And them being very young, a couple of them were minors. Were under 18, so we had to be very careful about some of the stuff that we pushed out, that we wouldn't get creepers on the internet coming around.
There are people like that on the internet.
A whole other thing to think about, and as their manager as well, I had to really think about that. Of course, having a daughter and my own kids helps, but that you want to push out a brand and grow a rock and roll band, and which is fun and creative, but yet not make sure you're kind of keeping the creepy people off to the sides as well.
So how do the young, newer bands like that make money then? Is it touring? Is it?
Yeah, no, good question, because, the record, you're getting a young band like that to engage into a record buying customer, a fan, is really the phase we're at now. The first 2 years was mostly about awareness. And I said, look, if we build this right, the money will come. So it's about just don't be focused on the money. And they've been touring pretty much nonstop. They're on their EP and 2 albums now, and they're getting ready to go in and make another one for a big summer tour coming up this year. And so they've, the main thing the first 2 years was about awareness, now about engagement, and now about getting a connection to a record buying public. And a lot of that actually happens at the show after they perform, go out to the merchandising booth, stand out there, and that's where we always see our biggest numbers come in. And there is a method at Venue as an app that tracks those sales so that it can go into SoundScan. SoundScan is the official reporting system used by the recording industry of America, so that you can actually track and get chart positions and make sure that those sales actually count.
Mm-hmm. So we have about 5 more minutes, so if there are any, we do have a question over here, Derek, to your right. Yep.
How you doing, guys?
Hey.
Big fan.
Thank you.
Fought my way to the front row of you and Megadeth and Dio in Chicago, Aragon.
Nice. 1988.
30
Yes.
years ago, yeah. So I have a question about social media. I'm not huge on that. I've done Twitter probably the last year. It seems like a lot of the big domain bloggers, I know Andrew, a lot of news is done on Twitter. I'm probably going to build out. I've only, bought and sold forever. This year I'd like to build some out. What is the absolute mandatory social media you have to have in your eyes for anything that you do, for your coffee, for your music, for anything? I know you kept saying Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
Do you do Twitter? Do you do any of the other stuff?
Facebook, good question. Facebook is, I think, still the industry standard in our industry for having that presence because of the engagement. Facebook, for the most part, is the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal of the celebrity arts. It's the place where people are going to go and hang out and just sort of scroll through the news feed first thing in the morning. Most of the big news sites also tag over there as well. So in our world, blabbermouth.net is like the CNN of, in fact, I think they bill themselves as that, the CNN of heavy metal news. So they, most of those things, fans will cut and paste and put it over there. I just did a whole bunch of interviews I narrated a film called The Rise of the LA Thrash, which is about the whole scene of the LA music scene back in the 80s. And so as I was doing interviews, I just got one right as we're going to come up here, that, pushing those out across social media. And Facebook is still the prime one. And I will often tag my Facebook so that it immediately feeds over to Twitter, so it's just one less thing I have to do. I have a team of people that run most of my social media now, mostly my creative guy over at my record label, because I can send it to him and say, hey, Tom, can you get this up? Because it's not only about where you put it, but when you put it. You know, we find that in the evening is usually the best time for us because it's morning in Europe. And so we need to think always about global things. Last week we pushed out a press release about, we created some coffee for some rock and roll groups like Skid Row and Autograph, and we pushed out a press release, and it just completely got buried under a couple of other things. One of them, ironically, being the 35 years of Megadeth campaign. So that, you know, wasn't that big of a deal, quite honestly. But also with that big trade show last week, the NAMM show, that was a huge trade show in our business. And you know, there were so many press releases and so many things coming out that it just got buried. So we chose at that trade show to use that as a soft launch for a lot of our products. We've got some wines, and again, this hard cider and coffee and various things that we're doing. So we chose to use Facebook Live was a much better way to reach our fans and our audience than pushing out a press release. And now this next week, what we're going to do is now we're going to push out press releases. Hey, as you saw at NAMM, right? So now we kind of, you know, we learned very quickly. So part of this, because the world responds so quickly with social media, it's important to also not insist that your way is always right. Like, we quickly had to learn on Monday last week. It was like, whoa, new strategy, like effective now. And we held back press releases. And so again, press releases for us at night, Facebook Live engagement, because people like to see you in the room. You know, and in the celebrity world, it's you know, you're kind of in this. They want to be around you and kind of be in your world and touch you, but they can't. You know, that's kind of the world we live in. So when you bring them in on sort of a video feed like a Facebook Live, it lets them kind of be part of, stand next to you in a safe kind of way.
Other questions? I think we have time for perhaps one more.
One quick one. What was the name of the girl band that?
Dollskin.
Say that. Spell that.
Okay, so D-O-L-L.
Doll,
and then skin, S-K-I-N, Dollskin, yeah. Yep. I think there's
minutes.
one in the back.
Is there a question? Yeah, there's a question.
Yeah.
Derek's
Yeah, go
coming.
ahead.
He's just slow.
Hi.
So my question is this. Oh,
Oh,
wow.
now you're very
Thank
loud.
you.
Super loud.
Johnny on the spot. All right. So my question is this. How do the demographics of your fans, the mix, right? So boomers, Gen X, millennials, right? How does that influence what messaging you push out and which platform you choose? And do you tailor it? And if so, how? And if not, why not?
So my partner Dave loves Twitter. He has a huge engagement on Twitter. I don't really care for Twitter that much. It's not something I've found to be very engaging. So obviously he has a very good feel for it, of how to use it and who to network with. He always will come to me and say, hey, this guy's following me, isn't this cool? You know, whoever that may be. So he's really good at that. He's really on the pulse of that. For me, you know, the Instagram thing I love, because I think a photo tells, you know, 1,000 stories, you know. So I like to have that. And again, I'll do the same thing if it's me posting it. I'll push it through to Facebook, I'll push it through to Twitter, I'll kind of push it out so it's a one-stop, because often I'm just moving too fast through the day that I can't sit here and, you know, force it through to each of those. Regarding the, you know, Dollskin, for instance, okay, you know, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, right?
Yeah.
Gen Z, you know, very young. What they're posting, and you know, they've got colored hair, and you know, they're part of that young work tour audience, you know, an alternative audience. So they're very much into their lifestyle, vegan. You know, young music, those kind of things. Megadeth, we have, you know, Gen Zers. We also have a lot of millennials, because we have now in our 35 years of Megadeth, I can see in the room, you who used to be at the front row at, you know, 1988, probably hanging in the back now, right? Not wanting to get beat up in the mosh pit. But in the front, I see, you know, the young girl and guy, you know, who came as boyfriend, girlfriend, and just got their Megadeth shirt at the Hot Topic at the mall, right? They're in the front. Then behind them is probably the 20-somethings, and then behind them is the 30-somethings, and then you're in the back, you know, maybe nursing a beer, just going, yeah, that's cool, I remember this, you know. So, I mean, I can see it as it goes along. So, you know, I think with Megadeth, we have a pretty broad message, and it kind of you know, I think the bigger you get, the broader the message. I think as you're building your brand and you're building your name, whether it be a band or even our coffee company, you know, you're looking for nuances and you're looking for little things, which may mean that you can post more things, and you know, you're always kind of trying to fill those little cracks. I know with the coffee business, for instance, you know, a lot of small local retailers in Minnesota, down in Florida, maybe one down in Tempe, Arizona, at a vape shop carrying our coffee. So we can be very nuanced, and because we're not a big cumbersome, you know, we're not Starbucks yet, but you know, because of what we do and because it's rock and roll, we can be very kind of nuanced into the message. You know, keep the corporate message the same. You know, we're a rock and roll coffee company, but we can be a little more tailored specifically into the particular retailers and maybe even the customer that would come into that shop.
All right, excellent. Andy, I think we might have, we have one more question.
Just wondered if you had any predictions for where, you know, maybe in 10 years, where you see interactions between, you know, public figure like yourself and fans. You know, do you see any kind of change or any kind of evolution going forward?
Well, I'm still waiting for the day when we can just Skype in the concert, right? Sit at home and we're jamming together, and behind us it looks like Wembley Arena or something, you know? That hasn't happened yet, you know? But, you know, it seems like despite what the web has done and is doing and will continue to do for us, you know, for me, what I've noticed that there's that book, The Roaring 2000s, that I remember I got turned on to in probably 2000, 2001 when I was reading it, and it was kind of right during the dot-com bubble. And I loved what he said in there about, you know, the printing press, Henry Ford's
Model T, the
production
line.
What was the word escaped me? But you know, the assembly line. Thank you. Printing press, assembly line, and the internet were the three mechanisms that changed the course of human history. And not because we can, you know, just go on and check our email, but because of the supply chain. You know, I mean, Amazon Prime, you know, to be able to go on there and click on something and have it delivered to you later that day or tomorrow is amazing. I mean, that wasn't even a reality when that book was written back in 2000, and now here it is. So, you know, those are the things. To me, a lot of it is just sort of supply chain, whether it's information, whether it's celebrity, whether it's, in fact, I saw Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue posted something today on Instagram. He said, imagine if Instagram went away and boom, you were no longer a model, right? Because you know the girls that like to take pictures of themselves and claim to be Instagram models, right? And I thought it was funny because there's this whole world of Instagram models, you know, that only happen because, hey, I can put it on the internet myself, you know, I don't have to pose for Playboy or something like that. And I think that's where Nikki was going with it, being the rock and roll guy that he is. But, you know, so you know, the good and the bad, you know, the good things that come from the internet, and of course, again, like I said, with the young girls in Dowskin, the creepy, weird stuff that you kind of have to filter out as well. So, you know, again, it would be nice one day to be able to play a show and not have to leave town and have the whole world like tune in now for the live Megadeth concert, that we could basically do a world tour in maybe an hour.
So, very quick follow-up question, and then Soren, I don't know if you want to talk about the charity and the guitars.
I just want to mention, I think onlineconcerts.com is in the auction now.
Onlineconcerts.com. They're trying to create that ability for you to do that, to phone it in.
Well, the one thing, I mean, look, we wouldn't even be at this conference if we could just phone it in, right? But what do we like? Well, we like to go to Vegas. I mean, who doesn't want to go to Vegas? We like to hang out, we have coffee, we chat, and there's a human interaction. And so far, the web, there's that screen that gets in the way of that, you know, that hasn't happened. And I think there's just a fundamental reaction to humans being in a room together. And that's what I've seen over the years of all these different things, is that, you know, playing a concert, that immediate, you know, music is about an emotional connection. I was turned on to a friend who brought me this device where artificial intelligence will write songs, and it's interesting because, you know, the original song had an emotional connection, whether it was a lyric, maybe a little guitar nuance that sort of followed up a lyric. You know, it's very emotional because it's humans writing it, and it connects with another human. So far, the tech can't do that yet, you know. Ones and zeros don't do what the heart can do, you know. And I think that's the one thing that, you know, we still have that on our side as humans.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you signed a couple of guitars, and are those for Water Nights or?
Yes, let me come to you guys.
Okay.
So first of all, we thought when a real rock star shows up Monday 9 a.m. in Vegas on stage. So thank you for that.
It's a new generation.
Yeah.
Oh.